In 1825, New York Governor DeWitt Clinton poured water from Lake Erie into New York Harbor, signaling the completion of the Erie Canal. Clinton believed the infrastructure improvements could transform American life, drive economic growth, and encourage political participation. This mural decoration, The Marriage of the Waters, was painted in DeWitt Clinton High School in New York City in 1905. It symbolizes the canal's completion and the connection of inland and ocean waterways. Before 1855, when immigrant ships arrived in New York, a doctor would row out from Staten Island to inspect them. After passing inspection and turning in a customs form, immigrants were free to go on their way. There was no formal customs immigration processing in the U.S. until August 1st of 1855, when the Castle Garden Immigration Station opened at the tip of Battery Park in New York Harbor. Ellis Island was opened from 1892 until 1954. Now, Dr. J.S. Johnson of Rock County, Wisconsin, wrote about his grandfather's immigration journey from Norway. He said, after a 16-week voyage, he arrived in New York. About the canal, his grandson writes, at the end was New York, where they waited again for a couple of days for the steamship to get ready to go up the Hudson River to Troy, New York, near Albany, where the Erie Canal had its start. Arriving there, their chests were transferred onto the canal boat, with its horse teams as power. Then began the furious speed of perhaps 2.5 miles per hour, when not docked. The baggage and passengers' place was on the deck, and since it became monotonous to sit there on the chest all day, they often got off and walked ahead along the canal path. When the boat caught up with them, they readied themselves on the first convenient bridge ahead, and then hopped down on the deck as the boat passed under. On one occasion, some passengers decided to hang down over the edge of the bridge so that the jump would not be too far. It all went well, except for the last large, heavy woman. And when the moment came for her to let go, she lost her courage and remained hanging as the boat slipped slowly by. Her cries immediately alerted the boatsmen, but first they had to get ashore, then back to the bridge where she was desperately hanging. With much effort, they got her back up on the bridge again. In his book, Land of Their Choice, Guthorne Thistle, in 1844, wrote, "We suffered great misery. We neither had room to sit down or stand up inside the boat. We felt like so many pigs stowed together. We had such fine weather at times that we could walk on the banks alongside the boat, and then we could gather fruit, especially apples, and brought it aboard in big sacks. But sometimes the cold was so severe that we could hardly keep warm by walking. And going below in the boat, I found suspended on either side of the cabin 3 long tiers of bookshelves or wooden planks. I saw on each shelf a microscopic sheet and blanket, and then I began to comprehend that the passengers were the library books, and we were to be arranged lengthwise on these shelves every night until morning." Before the canal, travel to Buffalo was very expensive and time-consuming. The Erie Canal offered a faster and cheaper way to reach the Great Lakes and the Midwest. The Erie Canal would cut the time of travel from New York City to Buffalo from 20 days overland to 8 days, and avoid a rough, long, and expensive stagecoach ride from Albany on the Hudson to Buffalo near Lake Erie. So what's the Erie Canal all about? Well, this 1825 map of New York State shows New York City, the Hudson River, the Erie Canal, Lake Erie, and Buffalo, New York. Immigrants in the early years of the Erie Canal would first travel 170 miles up the Hudson River, followed by 363 miles on the Erie Canal from Albany to Buffalo. This map shows a better view of the Erie Canal from the Hudson River to Buffalo on Lake Erie. The canal route used the Mohawk River east of Syracuse. The canal couldn't use Lake Ontario, as that would have left them below Niagara Falls. This map shows other canals that intersected with the Erie Canal: the Oswego, the Black River, Shenandoah, Champlain, and the Genesee Valley canals. We're also reminded that this network of canals was mainly used for the shipment of goods and crops from upstate New York to the large cities on the Atlantic coast, and immigrant passage was a secondary purpose of the canal. This is an elevation profile of the Erie Canal to show elevation changes from Albany on the Hudson River on the right to Buffalo on Lake Erie on the left. One of the obstacles that canal builders had to overcome was the change in elevation of 568 feet from the Hudson River to Lake Erie at Buffalo, New York. Notice the gates and the gate levers. There were 27 locks in the first 30 miles of the canal from the Hudson River. The 1825 Erie Canal had 83 locks measuring 90 feet long and 15 feet wide, and double gates were constructed where traffic required them. Mules or horses pulled the canal boats. At Lockport, New York, the western terminus of the canal features a 56-foot cliff over which the Niagara River cascades into Niagara Falls. Known as the Niagara Escarpment, this limestone ridge extends from the upper Great Lakes to Niagara Falls and the southern shore of Lake Ontario. The Erie Canal needed to raise canal boats over this escarpment to reach the level of Lake Erie. Getting the canal up and over the Niagara Escarpment was accomplished by building 5 sequential pairs of locks. One set of locks to ascending traffic going west, another set of locks descending traffic going east. An early photo of the Lockport locks. Notice the solid rock that the locks had to cut through. Each lock in the early years was limited to 8 feet in height. Another engineering problem canal builders had to face was how to keep the canal water level over rivers and ravines. The canal route along the south shore of Lake Ontario was rugged, requiring the canal crossing rivers and ridges. Originally, the Erie Canal had 18 aqueducts, which permitted the canal to cross rivers and ravines while keeping the water level. By the mid-1800s, there were 36 aqueducts in use. An artist's drawing of Rexford Flats Aqueduct near Schenectady, New York, in the 1800s. At Schenectady, New York, the Rexford Aqueduct crossed the Mohawk River. Built in 1842, it continued in operation until the new state barge system opened in New York State in 1916. A major portion of the Rexford Aqueduct was removed in 1918. The Erie Canal crossed the Genesee River in Rochester, New York. Today, the canal is now a roadway. The Rochester Aqueduct was constructed from 1836 to 1842, and originally carried the Erie Canal over the Genesee River. The overall length of the aqueduct, including the wings and abutments, was 800 feet. The aqueduct was 70 feet wide and had large parapets on either side. It's one of the 4 major aqueducts in the mid-century Erie Canal system. A railroad link from New York City to Buffalo was completed in the 1840s and was the beginning of the end of the Erie Canal as an immigrant link to the Midwest. However, up into the 1850s, canal boats were still the cheapest way to travel, especially when considering the high rail costs for transporting the immigrants' heavy trunks. In 1845, at the height of canal immigrant operation, 100,000 westward-bound immigrant people passed through Buffalo on their way to the Midwest. So how did the canal operators collect fees to offset the cost of building and operating the Erie Canal? This building is a waylock building. It's a place where a lock is used for weighing barges and their cargo. Notice the beams that are used to open and close the lock gates. Here's a model that shows a barge entering the waylock building, while another barge waits outside for its turn. A view of Syracuse, New York, and the Erie Canal before the canal became a major street in downtown Syracuse. On the right of the photo, a barge is entering the waylock. This model shows the empty lock and its system of pulleys to lift and weigh the barge. The locks at the waylock were designed in the same manner as a standard lock. However, the basic function of each type was different. In a traditional lock, flooding the chamber was a simple function of gravity, the upper pool of water being allowed gravity to flush water into the lock. In the waylock, boats entered the lock chamber, and water was drained through a culvert under the city into a nearby canal, and the boat settled onto a wooden cradle attached by rods to a scale. The unloaded boat weight from its empty weight certificate was subtracted from the measured loaded weight to determine the weight of the cargo. The weighmaster then charged a toll based on that weight and what the boat was carrying and how far it was going. Today, the Erie Canal in Syracuse is Canal Street. The Waylock building is now the Erie Canal Museum in Syracuse, and the barge lock is now glassed in, and the lock gates are simulated in the foreground of this recent picture. This view shows the barge ready to enter the waylock. Let's not forget about the mules and horses that pulled the canal boats. Stone and water made the Erie Canal, but innovation, bold imagination, hard work, and sacrifice are just as much a part of what made it America's greatest man-made waterway. This is a crossover bridge on which mules and horses could cross over the canal and pull the boats in the reverse direction after a resting period. The mules or horses usually worked for about 15 miles, and then, after a rest, they crossed over the bridge and pulled boats back 15 miles. And now a bit about engineering and canal specifications. The canal was 4 feet deep, 40 feet wide, and was bordered by an 8-foot wide berm or towpath. Efforts have been made to save some of the historical remnants of the 1825 original canal. There are portions of these canal remnants all along the canal's length. In addition to the Syracuse Canal Museum, there is a museum called the Erie Canal Village in Rome, New York. There is a Lockport Canal Museum, and there are other local museums, all devoted to the canal era. Major improvements were made to the Erie Canal in 1862 and then again in 1918 to lengthen, widen, and deepen the canal. Also, the number of locks were reduced, allowing barge sizes to be increased. Today, the Erie Canal is open from early May through mid-October, and it functions as a recreational waterway, as a supply of fresh water, and for flood control. This is one of 2 tall gates at Lockport, replacing the 5 shorter wooden gates from the early days. A portion of the Erie Canal today with 1918 dimensions. I visited the Erie Canal in 2015 with my 3 sons as part of a nostalgia tour of Hall of Fames, baseball, basketball, football, rock and roll, etc. This historical sign marks the east end of the Erie Canal at the Hudson River near Albany, New York.